So now we're going to focus on the instrumentation, and this is primarily for the scrub techs. It's for the whole process for the getting ready for a case. I would say like 98% of it is for the scrub techs. So it's heavily geared towards them and instrumentation. So if you look here, we have 8 trays that are laid out here that are open, and these trays are specific for the robot. So a couple things to kind of be aware of. So let's kind of come over here. These 4 trays here, you'll use these for screws only. These 4 trays over here will be for inner body solutions. So you can do screws and inner bodies, and I'm going to kind of go through the names of some of these trays here. So I'll start with this tray here first. This is what we call our navigation tray. So this is our main nav tray. You'll use this tray whether it's for screws, for inner bodies, or screws and inner bodies. So you'll always pull this tray here. So you'll have this tray. Then if you're doing screws, then you're going to have these other 3 trays that you're going to pull as well. You have our navigated Creo MIS tray. We have our end effector tray. And then we have our Globus power tray. All right. So these trays here will be specific for screws. And then for inner bodies, we have what we call our navigation 2 tray. And then we have our disc prep for, what do we have here? For our posterior, no, actually, this is our laterals. So this is disc prep for laterals. I don't see the name on there, but here, this is our lateral inserter tray here. So it's Rise L and ELSA. So these are for our lateral cage insertion. So, and then here we have what we call our articulating arm, and we'll use this for the table mount. So you can use a table mount if you wanted to, your traditional table mount, or we can actually use the robot's arm as a table mount, and we'll need to use this to basically replace the table mount. All right, so a couple of basic things that we'll start with the screws first, just to keep things kind of straightforward and simple. So in our nav tray, there's a few basic things that we're going to need to pull out. So we'll start with this guy here. This is what we call our dynamic reference base. No one ever really calls it dynamic reference base. They'll just call it DRB for short. Or it's your main reference array. So if you've done other navigated platforms, whether it's Stealth or BrainLab, all those systems have their primary main reference array, and this is ours. This is what it looks like, and we officially call it the dynamic reference base. So we call it dynamic because this ratchets right here. So you can see how this moves here, and with other platforms, they're more static, so they don't move. And so what the thought was, if you're in a case and this is attached to the patient and it's in bone, if you have a bovie or suction cord that's underneath here, and in the case it constantly keeps pulling on here, eventually it may loosen it from the bone. So what if we absorb that force, and if it clicks up one, we say, okay, at least now I know that potentially we can get back to that same spot, because what we'll do is we'll take a skin marker and we'll mark here where it's at. So if it moves, we'll know that that mark is different now. So just a little subtle thing as to why we call it the dynamic reference base. And then we'll get into something else that's going to really give us some great feedback as to if this moved or not. And that really separates us from the other navigation platforms that's out there in the market. So we'll pull that guy there. And then we have to figure out, well, how are we going to attach that to our patient? So we have basically 3 options. Show you this guy here. This is what we call our Quattro spike. Well, for whatever option we choose, it'll always be a long and a short version of it. So this is our Quattro spike. This here will be placed on the patient's PSIS, so essentially somewhere on the crest. So we want to make sure we get solid bone purchase with this. So what the surgeon will do is they'll palpate, they'll feel where they want to make where they want to place this, and then they'll make an incision, and then they'll go ahead and insert this, mallet it in, so that we can attach this to the main DRB. So this is one option. Again, Usually they're using this if it's a PERT case and they're going to place this on the patient's PSIS. Option number 2 is what we call our bone clamp. You can see the teeth there. And essentially what happens is, if I turn this right side up, there's a notch here, and I'm going to grab something out of the tray, a driver. So if they're using this, this will attach to the spinous process. So I can open this up with this wrench like this, or close it. So you can see the teeth there. So we'll pull this. Again, short and long version of this spinous process clamp. Just depends. If it's a thoracic region that you're working on, then they'll make a, they'll attach this to the spinous process. Just depends on, if it's a PERT case for a thoracic level, they'll make a small midline incision, attach it to the spinous process, and then they can still place those screws percutaneously. And then the third option, which is found on the bottom of your nav tray here, and I'll just pull these out. And again, short and long versions of this. So, have those flip flops. You can see those there. So what we have here is a starter pin, and this is what we call our low profile quattro spike. So has 4 prongs, just like these 4 prongs, but this is quattro spike. These are low profile quattro spikes. So just a smaller footprint. The surgeon can aspirate through there as well if they wanted to. For bone, what was I going to say? This too goes on the patient's PSIS. So again, this is a little bit different. So I'll kind of give you an example of what that's going to look like. So I'll just take one of these. And then we have an impaction cap that we'll pull out of the bottom of this tray as well. So for the low profile quattro spike, it's a 3-step process, or 3 things that you're going to use. So to give you an idea of what this is going to look like, typically I like to have this starter pin inserted first. So then they'll palpate, feel on the crest where they want to be at, make the incision, insert like this. Usually they'll do it straight up and down. Give it a couple of quick mallets just to get it in there. And then they'll put the impaction cap over the top like that. And then they'll come here, mallet, and they'll angle this about 30 degrees, coddle. And then once they're in that bone, they'll feel that. They'll take the impaction cap off, grab a pair of cokers, pull this out. This stays in bone. Okay? So that'll stay in bone like that. And then I'm going to grab our DRB, and essentially what they'll do is they'll slide this piece here over the top like this. So it'll look something like this. This will be angled towards the camera. Notice the base here is wide right here. So the wide base is always at the bottom like this. So it'll look like that. Because technically I could take this, flip it upside down, and insert it, and it could look like this. But now, notice how the array is higher up. It's all about line of sight, just like any navigation platform. It's about line of sight. So now this is up higher. My camera is looking this way. Potentially this could get in the way of me navigating my instruments back here. So that's why I like to have the wide base at the bottom, like so. Okay? And then also, this is more for the surgeon or first assist. I like to have my reference ray, my DRB, on the patient's right side. This notch here is out of the way now. If this was on my left side, if I come over here, potentially this could be in the way of me placing maybe a S1 screw or something like that. So that's why we like to have it on the right side so it's out of the way and it won't be in the way of any screws. All right, so when you attach this, make sure this is nice and secure and tight. Some people will do it with their fingers. Others will take that driver and ratchet it and make sure it's really nice and secure. All right.